Chairman, dear members of ΣΑ.Σ.Ο.Ε.Ε, Greek farmers, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a pleasure to be here in Thessaloniki for the first time in my life. I regret to admit that, and I apologize that I don't speak your civilized language. There's a gap in my education there, but I hope that I could convey some of the messages from European farming community to you here in Thessaloniki today. I'm Secretary General of Copa-Cogeca European farmers and their agri-cooperatives in Brussels. We work together with, roughly speaking, 70 member organizations, of which 34 for the moment are cooperative organizations, and amongst them we have ΣΑ.Σ.Ο.Ε.Ε, and in fact K.A.P from Greece in our membership. And we are very happy for that fact that we have active Greek members amongst our ranks. And that is the reason here today that I wanted to see you and I wanted to come to meet you and make myself available for you, listen to you, because of the fact that Greek economy has gone through very difficult times over the past few years, and we have been following that from the Brussels perspective, from our organization perspective, with great concern. That how do our colleagues and our brothers and sisters in Greek agriculture survive? And of course, to a certain extent, we have to say that it has been sobering to see that the Greek agriculture has become actually a pillar of the society, like your Prime Minister famously once said. However, does it mean that we have a brighter future for our farmers and their families? I don't think that will happen without our own work. And that is something that I would like to salute here today to you, that work that you have organized yourselves, you have worked for your organization themselves, you have organized your cooperatives, and I'm quite worried to hear that the cooperative movement is having some trouble in its market share, in its development. Today I wanted to share with you with some of the thoughts that we have developed at EU level. I'm a member of a long line of Finnish farmers, 4,000 kilometers north. We still have snow, 60 centimeters, and we may go out to the fields in about 2 months. So we have different conditions, but the thing that binds us together with the Greek is that we work in the same common market. We have the same consumers, 500 million plus consumers that we serve. I'm not an active farmer myself, but then I'm a 10th generation farmer on my farm, and I hope that some of my kids, the 11th generation, would be able to take over. I would like to talk to you about 3 things: common agricultural policy, bit of trade, and climate change. And before I do that, I would like to show you a couple of slides which illustrate why we are here and why we are in the business, why we need to talk about farmers. This is first of them. We have had some positive development in the EU when it comes to agricultural income per family work unit, but then it's still very much below the European Union average. It's still less than half of what the average European salaried worker gets. And this is not acceptable for our future, and especially for our future families. Also, when we take a look into another aspect from European Union perspective, in relation of national income levels, Greek is in the middle, roughly speaking there, if you see, is fairly good illustration of the European Union situation. But that means that half of your income comes from support, and only the other half comes from the market. And you are still below the average income of the Greek employed person. This is not sustainable for our sector and for your young, for those brilliant minds, both men and women, that we need in not only in Greek agriculture, but in EU agriculture to make it happen as the society expects us to do in future. and especially for the climate change. So make no mistake, we have no hope in our sector, especially for the young, if we cannot demonstrate the benefits, advantages that our sector can provide to those young people and their future families. I have two 16-year-old kids and a firstborn 18-year-old. And just before I left to Greece, my daughter came to me and asked for permission for her school in Brussels to take part in this climate change demonstration, which apparently is going to take place here in Greece too. Of course, I had to give it to her because this is about the young generation itself, but I certainly made sure that she wouldn't carry any controversial placards in the demonstration against the agricultural interest. But the point here is that we need to lure those people back to agriculture. And that's why we need to talk about climate change. We have to do it in the CAP environment. And these figures, I'm not going to explain that in detail, don't worry. But these figures show that we have had an evolution in the European Union Common Agricultural Policy. And those of you who have been farming long enough, you know you have felt these changes in your skin. How that would affect your family life, what is the economics, and what do you need to do in return of the support, and how much market access you have. Common agricultural policy is in line with the curve, less and less of the EU policy framework and the budget, but it's still very much at the heart of the EU policies. Common agricultural policy is truly European policy that affects individual farming families and farmers all across the EU. If the European Commission and other institutions do not listen to your concerns, there's no justification for that common policy of common agricultural policy. And this is my final slide before I give you some more detailed illustrations. Unfortunately, agriculture has become a silvery hair generation business. And while I show some signs of becoming old, that's not good for the business. That's not good for the future of farming. Our average farm in Europe is about 16 hectares. If we continue with this pace, that only about 6% of the farmers are below 35, in the future decades, we have to 20-fold the farm size in order to sustain the current agricultural activity. In terms of farm size, like we would have to go well beyond 100 hectares per farm. How realistic is it here in Greece? How realistic is it in my native Finland? I come from Lake District, which looks like your archipelago. We have farms, but they are scattered around with no true opportunity to become, let's say, bigger in terms of the agricultural activity. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take you through some. This is my final slide, but it's not the end of my presentation. I take you through some of the thoughts on each of these aspects that I mentioned: common agricultural policy, trade, and climate. We ask for sufficient funds for European Common Agricultural Policy. The famous multi-annual financial framework has to provide sufficient means for you to do your business. Cuts that have been proposed are not acceptable. We need to reconstruct common agricultural policy, and it needs to be reconstructed in a way that it provides foodstuffs and services to the society in line with the market. You know that the Commission has proposed so-called delivery model, and that means that in future, perhaps 2021-22 onwards, we will be measured against the performance of your farms, especially when it comes to certain indicators in environmental aspects. We support this, provided that it brings in simplification to your lives and it maintains the commonality of the policy, because if we lose the commonality, we will lose also the common funding in the long run. Very much at heart is national plan, and I heard your speeches this morning where the national plan was encouraged, and this is exactly what we do too. That Greek National Strategic Plan on your agriculture must reflect your conditions and your realities in a way that you can actually do, once again, the business that you are good at. In particular, we need to make investment, and I'm very happy to hear that some of these investments have been initiated in Greece when it comes to infrastructure and especially data, transfer data, and making sure that digital agenda also benefits Greek farmers. Hopefully those investments go forward and they truly give you some advantages in your business. You have all followed Brexit, and while at least I feel desperate about our colleagues in the UK, it looks like a circus for the moment, to be frank. This is a good illustration of the increased volatility in our political environment. Mr. Trump was referred to this earlier, and I completely agree. I think Mr. Trump is probably the only person on this earth that denies climate change. Look out of the window, most parts of the world actually are facing the consequences already. We need to work on that. And I'm afraid I have to say that dividing the European Common Market, UK leaving the Common Market, severing those integrated links is not very good to promote our responses to those future challenges. It will cut off our importance in global stage, and it would certainly treat both UK and EU, also here in Greek farmers unfairly, because those market disruptions will most probably enter also to your national market. I'm very unhappy to say that, but this is what we learned from the Russian crisis. Then, finally, climate change. On 14th of February, our Presidia in Brussels approved a position, very short declaration on climate change. We feel that climate change is an opportunity for us. This is something that we can actually demonstrate what we can do. We support Paris Agreement. We point out that your primary role is to produce food and fiber. If you don't do that, there's no justification for agriculture. We are not there to provide services to some other people in the rural areas alone. We are there to produce food and make sure that food security is at the heart of the societal work. And that was also the cornerstone of the Paris Agreement. However, when we take a look into the measures that lie beneath the climate change, it is very much about adaptation. How do you, as a farmer and a cooperative representative, how can you adapt to the changes in your environment? That is going to dictate your survival, not the mitigation, not how much carbon can you tie down to the soil. Of course, that is something that we need to do. But it is about adaptation. We adapt to the changing environment, and then in addition to that, we sequestrate carbon. This is easier in sectors such as forest, which I'm very much involved with. But then again, we don't have to produce food. We produce fiber, but we don't have to produce food as a precondition to your existence. And we need policy coherence. We need policies both at national level, Greek government level. Your parliament needs to make some wise decisions, and we need to make sure that EU policies supporting those decisions are in line with expectations of society while you have to react to the climate change. We need to enhance sustainable traditional technologies that we believe that would actually enable us to do that, and we need to have access to new technologies. European Union is world champion in for instance, plant breeding. It was an Austrian monk, Mendel, who came up with a modern approach to genetics 200 years ago. We cannot lose that position in the global trade. We are the champions on how to do things better and in the most sustainable manner. So therefore, it is truly crucially important also for our cooperatives. And that is why I'm so pleased that S.A.S.O.E.E. has taken this initiative here today to talk about climate change and how this should be a part of our future planning. It is very much about cooperatives also getting adapted to the climate change, but it is also about providing farmers access to the consumers, increasingly informing the consumers what the farmers, cooperative members do in their struggle to provide better quality food, and while they do it, climate change sustainable action. So I'm particularly pleased to see that initiative here in S.A.S.O.E.E., knowing all the hardship that you have gone through in the Greek agriculture sector in the recent years. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a privilege to join you here today here in Thessaloniki. I hope that in case you disagree with me, you let me know, because that's also why I'm here, to listen to you and take back some of the messages that you could provide to us. Thank you very much.